Dear friends, Mano Elia here. This is the Study of Stuff. Thank you all for tuning in. I've received quite a few messages recently asking me where the hell I've been. I'm going to tell you right now. It's been a while since I put an episode out, and good reason for that. Well, first reason is I'm rethinking a lot of the things I used to believe. Not to say that I disagree with everything I used to believe, but there's quite a few things that have come to light that I wanted to rethink. And we're going to be talking about that kind of stuff down the road. We're going to get into a little bit of that. But for today's episode, it's more relevant to talk about the other reason why it's been a while since I put a podcast episode out. And that is because I've been busy putting together community, trying to build community, trying to participate in community building. And wow, what a great journey it's been. I've been getting out there trying to meet a lot of great expats, and I've made some amazing friends, and I know some of them are listening to me right now. Thank you guys for being in my life. I've also been out there meeting a lot of local Mexicans and really integrating to the society here. And that's a big, big part of community building. And that leads me into this episode really nicely and smoothly. One of the individuals that's part of this community that I'm helping build here in Mexico, their daughter, Julia Ramirez, had to do a high school project about community building, alternative lifestyles from the perspective of an international individual. And I guess I fit the bill. So she asked if she could ask me some questions and interview me. I said yeah, and I recorded it just in case she needed some notes to take. Take some notes. But after I started listening to the episode and going, wow, this is a pretty good episode. Why? Well, because Julia asks some fantastic questions. She's well-spoken, and she's great at leading a conversation. Amazing at it. And we had a great conversation. We discussed a lot of the stuff that I've been participating in this last year. A lot of the pitfalls of building community, the different types of communities, and so on and so forth. Now, the other reason I wanted to put this out is because that's going to be an ongoing theme in the next little while, community building and how to go about doing it and how to create parallel societies. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of interviewing Derek Brose, who many of you know, and I look forward to putting that episode out for you guys very, very soon, where we discuss a lot of the issues pertaining to community building here in Mexico and just generally speaking, and how we can kind of push past the chaos of the last couple of years and have some solution-based ideas presented. Anyways, without further ado, here's Julia letting you know a little bit about herself and why she did this, and then the episode. Man, you got some great stuff coming down the pipeline here, so check this one out, man. I'll see you guys soon. Love you all. Word to Big Bird and Jing Jang to Big Big Bang. Yeah, a little bit of nonsense there at the end, you know what I'm saying?
Hey, my name is Julia Ramirez. I'm 19 years old and I'm studying high school here in Mexico. This is my first time interviewing someone, so I'm really excited. I am working on a school project of a subject that's called Multicultural Agents and Perspectives. And we had to choose a topic to work with the whole semester for our biggest project that's called Key Activity. I chose the topic of community living and have been researching it for a while. It is something that really interests me and I've been involved in recently. The project focuses mainly on exploring culture and the way it affects us. We had to look for someone with a different cultural background than our own and interview them. That's how I came across Mano. The interview is about his perspective on different aspects of alternative lifestyles and, of course, culture, the recent changes of the world, and a bunch of other topics that are related. And yeah, I'm really glad to be here and thankful to have this opportunity. I want to tell you a little bit about what this project is about. It's a key activity that's like a main project of the whole semester of a subject that's called Multicultural Agents and Perspectives. It's like a really contemporary new subject. I was not really sure what the subject was about until we started going through the topics and everything. And this project basically is about like researching a topic that interests us. So this is a topic that I chose, and I chose like community living as a whole, and also for a way of me getting more involved like in this topic, and because it's really interesting to me and also to my family. So that's why I chose this one. And yeah, we have to do some interviews, and it had to be with an international person. So I'm so glad you're here. And well, how about we start by telling me a little bit about yourself and like your stance on this topic in general?
So for me, my name is Mano. First of all, I'm a musician, podcaster, a family. Like I have a family, and I've recently moved to Mexico. But it hasn't even been a year yet. In November, it'll be a year. So building community and trying to find ways of communicating with others, both whether they're Spanish speaking or international. That's a good skill to have, is how, like being able to communicate with people, as well as community building. A big part of community building is communication. So a little bit about myself. I think I covered the basics, but the real thing is about me is that I'm very interested in finding ways of how human beings can kind of live together in a way that's functional for everyone. So a way where people can kind of, because not everybody has the same interests or wants in life, but they have something in common. And usually that's something like survival or living a happy life or living a harmonious, balanced life. There's always something that we can find, some sort of common thread. So I normally like to explore that with whatever I do, whether it's music or podcasting or why I'm here in Mexico. So I think I answered your question. I kind of went all over the place, but
No,
basically I'm Mano.
yeah, perfect. So glad to meet you, Mano. And you said this about like communicating and
Mhm,
the diversity that exists. A lot about my project is focused on culture and
mhm.
cultural expressions. So I wanted to ask you, like, what do you understand as culture in general? And in which way do you think culture relates to community living or affects the way people can uh, communicate or find this like something in common that brings them together? And is it culture like a benefit or maybe an obstacle for this?
That's actually a great question. Good question off the bat. It's extremely important. Culture in general is what human beings use as a way to kind of live life, celebrate life, communicate with people, and how they find ways of coexisting, how they understand art, how they interpret art. And there's many different components to what culture is. Sorry. And many people have a different way of defining culture. But for me, all of those things I just mentioned have a big part to do with culture. Now, I'm from Canada. I didn't mention that earlier. I should have. Originally, I'm from Canada, from Toronto, Ontario, a very big city. And the culture in Toronto is extremely multicultural. A lot of countries and cities claim that they're very multicultural. And I mean, they are to a degree. But in Toronto, it really is an extremely multicultural city. Um, you'll find every walk of life, and I literally mean that, from every part of the globe, all living with each other. They're not even in separate areas of the city. A lot of cities I've been to, they may be multicultural, but they're segregated. You'll have like the Italians over here and so on and so forth. But in Toronto, like literally you walk down the street, you'll scream out a word in any language and someone will respond. It's crazy like that. So growing up in that environment, culture was a big part of, not something I thought about because it just was the way I lived. But later, as I got older and I got a little bit more philosophical, I started to understand the importance of that. So to answer your question, can it be a benefit? Can it be a hindrance? I think it could be both. And like many things, with with a human experience, they can be both. So how it can be a benefit is, for example, one of the communities I'm working with here, I'm working with a lot of international individuals, a lot of local Mexicans, and a lot of expats from Canada, the US, the UK, and so on and so forth. And two of the original founders of the community they put it really well. They said that they want to encourage all people to come from all different walks of life and different cultures because they may all bring with them a piece of the puzzle to some problem that may arise that another person from another community or culture may not have encountered or even thought of. So, for example, when we were on this beautiful property that we're building this community, I started to see some building techniques that were different to me. They were culturally different because the way they build houses in Canada is very different. And the way that they think of hot and cold is different. Of course, Canada is an extremely cold country. Mexico is not. But the common denominator was circulation within the house. So I started suggesting some techniques used in Canada on how they deal with the problem of air circulation in the house, and said, hey, maybe we can incorporate this to this Mexican idea. So someone may think this is not a cultural thing, but absolutely it is, because the way we live and the buildings we live in should be art. They should. They're not always, but they should be. But they're all functional, and they're a part of something that we bring with us from different parts of the world. So going back to the community thing, by offering that piece of advice, it actually helped individuals here kind of think of housing a little bit different, and vice versa, of course, right? So it'd be the same thing with like food or medicine or this and that. Different parts of the world have different herbs that they grow, and they may not be so common in Canada, let's say, but it's a very medicinal herb. And someone from India may say, oh, turmeric. I mean, of course, everyone in Canada knows what turmeric is, but originally, let's say that you're the first Canadian person and you're offered this strange root, and then you don't really consider the medicinal properties, and this other person from this other culture, this other place, brings it to you. Now they've introduced you to a totally different healing medicine that you never would have considered. Where it's negative is with that, we sometimes bring our ego. We bring our, we think we're better than, you know what I'm saying? And that is a hard thing to kind of notice sometimes. Sometimes it's subtle, right? Like you don't come in and say like, start telling everyone what to do, but inside your head, you might have some back talk where you're like, that's a pretty stupid idea. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So with culture, sometimes comes baggage. If not checked, that can affect both the person that you're giving advice to or yourself. It may keep you from receiving good advice. So back to the turmeric example, let's say you're the very first Canadian that's shown turmeric, and you're like, oh, I don't want that. That's weird, and this and that. And all of a sudden, the ailment is still there. So one of the great things about turmeric, it helps with inflammation. So let's say you had an inflammation problem. This individual from India is trying to help you, and all of a sudden you're like, ew, it's gross, or it looks like this. I don't want it. Well, your ego and the baggage that you brought into this conversation culturally has kept you from something that could help you and your family. I hope I answered your question. I didn't babble too much.
No, it's perfect. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I totally get the point you're saying and the point you're making, and how it can be like a negative or a positive aspect. And about this, what would you say could be, or maybe it's one part of the solution of bringing this, like making this path of communication for creating a multiculturalist society,
Multicultural, yeah.
multicultural, sorry, community or society, without making this like divisions that may create for cultural shocks or something. Like, how can you in a community make this path like easier or more accessible for the people that live there, that are in from different backgrounds?
Again, good question. Actually, this question is extremely important, and I'm actually working on an interview. I'm getting ready for an interview that I'm going to be having in a month or so, and actually, this is going to be a focal point in my discussion with Derek Bros. He's a pretty, I would consider him an expert on how to build parallel societies and communities in Mexico. So this issue is a very big one. I think the best way I can answer that, from my experience from participating in a few in Canada and now here in Mexico, is maybe having those conversations that might be difficult about what your belief systems are, what your values are, what you want to see in the future. Maybe have those conversations before you decide to join a community or ask someone to come into your community, because at that point it gets a little complicated. I would look at it like I do a band member. Like now I'm trying to put a band together, so I'm kind of, this is actually on the back of my mind, but in terms of a band. Or if you're getting into a relationship with someone and you're thinking about marrying someone or whatever, you should have those difficult conversations before you make the decision to do those things. It might save you time and money and complications. So to answer your question, I would kind of ask myself first, what is it that I'm looking for in community? What do I want in this community? Why do I want to be a part of this community? Because that's the thing. There's different kinds of communities out there, right? And if the community has already set out their mission and it opposes your ideals and your views, you approaching this community and going in there and trying to change things is probably not a good idea. So to avoid a lot of these cultural issues that you were referring to, the first thing I would start with is why does someone want to join this community? What are your beliefs? Do they align with mine and the other people of this community? They don't have to 100%, but there has to be some core values that we both share, that we all share, correct? And it's kind of like, I look at it as choosing your neighbor. When you're building a community, you have the opportunity to choose a neighbor. When the community is built, at that point, they have certain ideals, like I just mentioned, and if they don't fit yours, and they're not ones that they want to change, maybe go to a different community. So to avoid that ego baggage, to avoid the negative of culture shock, I like that the term you used. I would kind of ask those questions beforehand, have my own answers beforehand, and then when I ask the other person, I'd have to assess, do they fit with mine? And if they don't, maybe rethink that individual for your community or yourself entering that community. That would kind of help. Now, if you're in the community already and you're having issues, at that point, it's the same thing that someone would suggest to anyone that's in a relationship. Have good, strong communication skills, have transparency and honesty. It's really cheesy to say those things, but they really are true. Like, it does work. It does happen because, conflict's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That was like such a complete answer. And yeah, I get exactly what you're saying of this. Like, I think it can sum up to communication and like bilateral communication from both sides,
Yes,
and having like clear what you want. That's maybe something of introspection of both parties, like the community and yourself
exactly.
even. So it is like a personal work at some extent. And yeah, like I
Absolutely.
that it's just a great conclusion. Thank you so much. And well, maybe moving forward a little bit, but still in the same topic of culture. Uh, would you say you could like find a piece of like cultural expressions or mediatic expressions in Canada, or any type of expression that you've um, encountered in your life that might set an idea to the general public, or just to like the people, and influence them about alternative lifestyles? And like, how would you say it can impact the way people view this type of like alternative ways of living? I don't know if I'm being clear.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. You're asking alternative societies or parallel societies or alternative communities in general. So, do you want me to explain how they? Sorry, can you repeat your question again?
Yeah, I'm
Sorry,
sorry.
sorry.
It it's a little bit not that
No,
clear.
it's
I'm like,
because I wasn't. I'm not sure if you want me to talk about like stuff that I've experienced in Canada in terms of how to implement alternative lifestyles, or do you mean in general, like how do I communicate that to somebody else? That's
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Kind of, how do you think general public view
Mhm.
this topic if
I
they
see.
get to reach, because a lot of people don't even know it exists.
True.
So to what extent do you think um, cultural expressions or media in general
Hmm.
portray an image of
Ah,
this to society, and like maybe share some examples of like personal experiences you might have lived about like this representation maybe that exists?
sure. Oh, perfect. Yeah, no, I fully get it now. Well, in Canada, I worked for a company that was extremely, they liked to really emphasize this idea of alternative living and all that stuff. It's Lush. Lush is the company. They're a cosmetic company, and they're very much about all this kind of stuff. So I have that experience. My daughter went to an alternative school in Canada for a little bit. So I have that experience to go off of. Plus, I was always in that type of a community for about 20 years on and off, and here as well. So I'll try to kind of tie it all together. So the media, well, there's two approaches to how the media goes about this. One, at first, back in the old days, it because I am that old, where I remember it was extremely strange. They kind of downplayed it. They made it more about like some sort of hippie communes or cult like, and gave it this like negative twist. That would constantly come up. I remember the company I was referring to earlier. People were like, "It sounds like a cult when you work there," or like. I would go to like retreats back in the day in Canada before this stuff was popular again, and people would kind of say, "Are you like joining some sort of cult? What is this type of behavior and all these weird things that you're doing?" So that there's that aspect, and I think that has changed over the years to some degree. It's become a little bit more open, like having the concept and idea of alternative. Now, to be fair, I did participate in a lot of things called alternative communities. I did back away from a lot of them because there was also some stuff that I didn't exactly didn't really fit with my views of the world or my values. So there's different kinds of alternative communities. So I think that's a very important aspect to point out. So where I'm going with this is defining the different types of alternative communities matters, because there are many that don't agree with each other, and they're all lumped into the same category as alternative. Do you know what I'm saying? So you can have like a very much a hippie style commune, which kind of has very socialistic, communistic belief systems. And then you can have the other side of it, where you have anarcho-capitalists, where they are still living completely alternative, very much so, but they're not at all they're not at all like the hippie communes. Then there's middle grounds as well. There's like agoristic style thinking. These terms are they all fit in like the world of libertarianism and all that. And now the way they would go about an alternative community is extremely different, right? And then we can even say like older indigenous people throughout the world, from Australia to here where I am in Mexico, all of Mesoamerica, Canada, the US, throughout the world, everywhere. You have these individuals that were always living this way that we call alternative today. It wasn't alternative to them, and they still exist. And especially here in Mexico, far more than there is in Canada and the US, for whatever reason. I don't want to get into those political reasons, but in Mexico, may I say, I adore Mexico. I really, truly do. And for many reasons. And this is one of them. The way that the indigenous communities are treated in Mexico is truly free to some degree. I mean, they have their problems. I don't mean that, but I mean, like if you go to Oaxaca and you see how a lot of the communities live there, they're a lot more isolated. They run on their own. They're completely self-sufficient. They're a little bit enclosed, and they're a little bit afraid of foreigners, and I totally understand why, including Mexican foreigners, not just someone like myself, but even someone like yourself. So there are those kinds of communities, and they shouldn't be lumped into the same, like this alternative community basket has many compartments, and they all don't agree. Like if you took someone from Oaxaca that lives that way, and they've been living like that for hundreds of years, and you drop them in the middle of a hippie commune by Playa del Carmen, it's not going to work. They're like, what the hell are you doing here, right? It's not going to work. So to give you a very specific example of what I'm trying to illustrate here in Mexico, because I want to move closer to the conversation about Mexican communities, because that's something that I'm very passionate about and I'm working hard at right now, is the example of Vice. Vice, the magazine / TV show. I'm talking about Vice magazine and all that. They have like all those like YouTube clips. Well, they put out a hit piece earlier this year. I think it was around April or around that time, April, May. And they were attacking a lot of expats like myself moving here to Mexico and going to these communes, right? And one of them, they were showing Anarchapulco, which is like a big conference, whatever. I'm not necessarily plugging or loving or hating the Anarchapulco. I do appreciate them quite a bit, but they took a hit on, they took a like a swing at Anarchapulco, which I thought was completely unfair. And the way that they did it was that they showed this footage of really cheesy situations where there was like a bunch of like expats sitting in a circle holding a spoon, and bend spoon, I love you, spoon, spoon, bend. And they're sitting there trying to bend the spoon with their minds. And they're showing this as all alternative communities are like this. Do those exist? 100%. And that's a thing about community and the alternative point of view of like how to live, where everything gets lumped in together. So then one thing you may agree with, but then 10 other things you may not agree with. I'm a part of the alternative lifestyle, I guess you would say, but I'm not sitting around in any circles with a spoon in my hand asking it to bend. I'm digging a hole so I can pour concrete, so I can build a house. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not sitting around doing that kind of stuff. So I find the media loves to do that. If they see somebody starting something that actually can be sustainable and can be a sovereign place where it's self-sufficient, they view that as a threat. So they're not going to go show you a beautiful indigenous community in Oaxaca. They're not going to show you the community that I'm a part of, where it's a good mix of everybody. They're not going to show you that. They're not going to show you beautiful bamboo structures made like overnight, almost 2-3 stories that hold up a whole bunch of weight. They're not going to show you that. They're going to show you a bunch of people sitting in a hut. You know what I mean? Like half naked, usually like white people from California or something, sitting around bending spoons in their hands. You know what I'm saying? So sorry, you got me a little worked up on that, because it's like, damn it, that's not what it's about.
Yeah, and it's very frustrating because you want to like kind of label yourself of being part of that community, but you don't want to be exactly like you said, like lumped in together with everyone else or with other values that you don't represent or other practices that you don't do. And I think that happens with almost every social group or
Yes.
almost every like community or like fandom or movement, even like for example in feminism.
Yep.
That you call yourself a feminist and then that means a bunch of things, and there's so many other branches and people speaking in name of feminism which represent absolutely different values than others.
Yep.
And that just like it's a common problem, and I think it has its roots on media. So
Yes.
yeah, I absolutely understand and I agree with what you say.
I really like the way you put that. That's exactly what I meant.
Yeah, thank you. And well, for us not to take so much time, although it's really interesting,
Take your time.
everything
I
you're
got time.
saying. I would like to ask also, like, what would be your general predictions for community living in the future, not only in Mexico or in Canada, but in general in the world? Because I think right now, or maybe it's just my perspective, but I think it's kind of like a turning point. Like right now, it's absolutely going like it's gonna go exponentially big, like grow. I believe, but I'm not sure what to expect, and I want to know like what are you expecting for the next 5, 10, 20 years, even for this topic specifically.
Okay. Again, you're really asking good questions. Okay. Well, let me try to answer this question without getting too political. Well, the world that we once knew before 2020 is long gone, and I think it's very important that we discuss that. Not our like. I'm not going to get too too crazy with the subject, but basically, I don't. It doesn't matter what your beliefs are. What's happened in the last 3 years. There's one thing that everybody can agree on. is that the life that we lived before in before 2020 and 2019 down is gone. In some degrees it's still here, but in a lot it's not. And one thing that we've all experienced is that we're not sure if we can trust the people we thought we could trust, whether it's government or whoever, right? You pick. None of that is as trustworthy as we thought, and none of it is as stable as we thought. Whether that's government, food, like where it comes from, water, where does that come from? Medicine, where does that come from? Your education system, where does that come from? Your money, where does that come from? How's that going to change? So to answer your question, I think you're 100% correct. It is going up exponentially, like crazy, and it will continue to because of these things. A lot of people have started to realize that things aren't as they thought they were. And I don't mean any one side of this, like of the debate out there. I'm saying everybody. Doesn't matter what your belief is, you can all agree on that. Everybody can agree on that. No matter where they sat the last 3 years on their opinions, they can't deny that the world has changed. So part of that is going to be very obvious very soon. There's going to be some food situations out there in the world, and there's going to be a couple of problems. A little less here in Mexico, but outside of Mexico, there's going to be a lot of them. And that's going to encourage people, and it probably already has the last 3 years, to rethink education, to rethink media, because I like that you keep talking about media, to rethink media, to rethink government, to rethink family, to rethink community, to rethink food, to rethink water, money. What does it mean? What is it? It's just an energy exchange. It's nothing more. Money is a promissory piece of paper. It's nothing more. It holds no value. So where do I see this going? Well, I think in the next 2 years, I think that some people have already started thinking this way about how they can build parallel societies and how they can build their own communities and find their own solutions to these problems. And those people have already started working. A lot of people are not there yet. Most people are either pretending it's not going to happen or are trying to educate themselves. So this kind of a conversation is extremely important, because people are going to want to educate themselves, and they're going to want to challenge me or you. And we need to take that challenge and debate it. And we need to have those conversations. So where do we go in the next couple of years when people become more, when they're faced with reality, they're going to realize that if they don't have an answer to these questions, they need an answer to these questions, the food, the money, all that stuff we talked about. And they're going to probably start looking for people that have started already, looking for these or actually practicing them, right? Like I thought I'm behind a little bit, but I'm starting to look and I go, actually, I'm not. I'm kind of moving forward. And so it's going to be my job and a lot of our jobs to help those who are new to the idea of thinking of life differently, to help them along the way. So where do I see it? I see some of us building community and succeeding. I see some of us failing. I see some of us teaching those that failed how to succeed. I see creating parallel networks. I keep using the term parallel society, and it's a common term now in my world. A lot of people have coined this term or use this term. What it really means is having two societies run next to each other. So let's call it the standard generic run-of-the-mill society that we know of, running one way, and then a second society running next to it, not completely detached, but parallel with it, right? Mexicans are very comfortable with that. Actually, Mexicans live parallel societies. So like, you have the underground, you have the above ground, and then you have the middle gray ground. And every Mexican knows what this means. Okay. So that is going to be something that you're going to see replicated throughout the world. Okay. So countries like Mexico, who have a long, strong history of this, and they're going to be probably not just Mexico, but I'm using Mexico because I'm here and I'm biased. I love Mexico. So Mexico and countries like Mexico are going to teach the world how to live and how to build parallel societies, along with individuals like myself, who I'm not Mexican, but I moved here with the intention of becoming a part of this, not to be next to it. You understand? So that's a key component. And I think that individuals that start realizing that they need to do something about it now will go looking for answers on how to solve these problems. So I think in the next 2-3 years, we're going to see some successes. We're going to see some big failures of communities. We're going to see growth in that department. And then I think you're going to see people that are not considered any of this stuff start looking into it and start figuring out how to do their own kind of communities, whether they're like the kind of community that I'm a part of, or an intentional community, or homesteading. A lot of Canadians are doing this now. A lot of Americans are doing this now. They're starting to realize that, hey, stuff's not what I thought it was, and they're starting to find ways of doing their own thing, and they're coming up with the same problems we're having here. So we've started talking. So I'm in many conversations with a lot of people. Like, I stopped giving energy to those conversations where it's like, prove this point, prove that point. I'm done with that. I'm not like, I'll have those conversations for fun, but I'm not going to sit there and invest my energy on that. What I am investing my energy on is somebody telling me about a way that they found to clean their water. Oh, how'd you do that? Oh, well, we did this. Oh, that's cool. And we start having those conversations. So I think that's gonna start growing. And I'm very optimistic for the future, but I think in the next 2 years is going to be tough. I think by 2030, by 2027, I think a lot of communities are going to start blowing up in a good way, not in a bad way. I should have used better words. And then by 2030 and 2040, between that decade, I really strongly believe that there's going to be two worlds out there. There's going to be the people that live in, well, the way that society is going, and I'm not a fan of that at all. And then there's going to be this side of it where people are going to start to detach from things that they don't like this, my cell phone. This is a great thing and a horrible thing. I view this as a gun. I can feed my family with a gun. I can protect my family with a gun, or I can go killing people. And I feel that in a lot of ways, I mean, it could be any piece of technology. I see the future going that way, where people either abandon technology, which I don't think a lot of people are going to do, but I think a lot of people like myself that have parallel societies and other communities are just going to find ways of using technology differently. And you're already seeing that with the banking system. You're already seeing that with social media, how that direction is taking. So I hope I answered your question, but maybe it sounds like I went a little bit too wide and too big, but I believe that communities fit within communities. So there's big communities and smaller communities within a big community, and the big community is a global community, and then the little ones all fit within it. And the alternative community is one little side of that big bubble, and within it there's little communities. Yeah. So I think I answered your question. I might have rambled a little too much.
No, yes, totally. And like the way you explain it, it gives me absolutely like this vision of the future, which is really uncertain for me, like in the global aspect, but also in the personal aspect, because I'm in all of this type of like what to study, or even to study at all, or just go right there and practice and live things. And yeah, it gives me a lot of like a clear perspective on what might be. So yes, thank you so much. And
okay, how do you see the future? Sorry, I'm gonna ask you a question.
Okay.
How do you see the future, and what did you hear me say that gave you hope, or a better view of the future?
Well, for me, I think something that totally changed in the pandemic is like my ability maybe of creating like expectations or plans for me right now. And I notice it's really clear that it's so hard for me to try and think about the future and make like a concrete plan for even 3 years or 5 years, because I just think anything could happen, and that was just the wake up call of the pandemic, of nothing is certain. And that's exactly what you said, and it was a lesson that I believe everyone learned the hard way. So for me, it's really difficult to think, but I agree with what you say of this, creating like I believe it of a way of regression, maybe, of like going back to our roots, or to our way of doing things that's like more in contact with nature. So most of the answers and most of what I've learned with like permaculture and this type of like sustainable farming and everything is that the best solution ever, and the like the best way of doing things is just imitating what's the nature, like what's in
Yep.
nature.
Yep.
So like that's just perfect. So if you can just replicate it as best of you as you can, it will be great. So I think we'll kind of slowly like move forward, but like getting this like knowledge of nature back to us. Like I hope that happens, honestly.
Mhm.
I'm not sure how it would happen, but I hope it does, because right now we're so disconnected of like exactly what you said, even the example of food. Like we're so just, we don't even think about where it comes from. We don't even
Yep.
question how it's grown, or how it was created. We just go and buy it. And when it, like, we are not able to do that, like everyone will just start all of a sudden like being scared of it and
Yeah.
questioning it and trying to find solutions. But I believe the solutions are like in nature. I don't know, maybe.
No, that makes complete sense. I fully agree. I mean, biomimicry is how we discovered how to use the fin on a submarine and how to make it go down. They mimic a shark or an airplane. They're using the shape of eagle wings. So I fully agree that even in that example, I know the example you're giving is like getting closer to nature, but I do believe that the answer usually is usually the right in front of us, isn't it? It's like
Yeah,
it's in plain sight.
yeah,
So
it's
I
interesting.
agree. I
And we
agree.
used to do that, like
Yes.
ancient communities used to do that. And
Yes.
the agricultural knowledge is really, most of it comes from like indigenous cultures or ancient cultures, that's the way they lived. But we had just thrown all of it away for like capitalism and profit and this like accelerated way of living. And I'm sorry, my dog
No
is
problem.
acting up.
No, do your thing. Don't worry.
And like, I don't know, that's the way I see it. Like going forward, because using the resources, like what you say of technology, I believe that like the most, like the biggest advantage it gives us is like the sharing knowledge between all of us. And we
Yep.
can learn about a community in India that created this water
Yep.
system, and then like you don't make the same mistakes that other people are making in other parts of the world. So I think that's some of the biggest advantage, like the communication. So maybe using the resources we have now,
Mhm.
but going back to the way we used to do things in
Do you mind
contact
if
with.
I challenge you a little bit? Because I do like how you ended that. But do you mind if I challenge you just a little bit?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I like how you ended that because I think that's closer to where I'm going and how I'm headed. Maybe would you agree? And this is more of a question, like a philosophical question to go back and forth on. Would you say that it's technology that's at fault, or the perspective of how we use it or be built it? So, for example, we gave the example of some, like you just gave the example that the technology can help us share a lot of information, right? And it can help us educate people quicker, faster, and you can learn how to do whatever you want. You can learn how to play an instrument. You can learn how to, build a house the way that they do in India, as you gave example about farming techniques or this and that. Actually, I was watching something today about how in India they were using Coca-Cola and Pepsi as a pesticide to spray their crops, and it was cheaper and better than using and more healthy than using like actual. So that's an example. So if we took modern sciences or whatever we want to call them, and they are developed in this false definition of capitalism, because what we live today is not capitalism. Capitalism died a long time ago. But it did that process did give us some stuff that we do use. Like for example, you and I are having a conversation halfway across the country based on the idea and concepts of technology and capitalism, or whatever this is, this crony monopoly capitalism. That's, if you want to give it a more proper, accurate term, it would be more monopoly capitalism, which is not actually capitalism. But anyways, the point I'm making is, the question I'm asking is, do you feel that it's possible for us to melt our natural ways, like we just discussed, whether it's permaculture or building an airplane and using a natural creature like a bird to learn how to design the wing? Could we also use our technology or build our technology or rethink our technology to actually help fields grow better, or to help houses get built quicker and more sustainable, and encourage people to educate themselves in different ways? Or do you think it's something that we should scrap? By the way, I flip flop on this on my own, so I just want to see your perspective on it.
Mm, I'm not sure. Like I think it's kind of contradictory.
Hmm.
Well, I think it like if you want to do one thing, you cannot, like, there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. So like you get to a point where there's no way you can build a phone with like a sustainable environment. There's no way. You'll always end up like affecting the environment or something. But I think it is like it would be very, very much difficult to reach to a point of like not using the technology we have right now.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
maybe in the meantime, like in the time that we're building this kind of parallel world or stuff, um use the tools in favor. Like I think there you can have an advantage. You can use them for helping.
Hmm.
Mostly, I would say I would draw the line mostly on um like trying to cleaning up the messed up things that we already damaged. So for example,
Agreed.
cleaning up the ocean of plastics. That isn't like an environment problem, but it's
Yep.
not naturally generated. Why is there plastic
True.
in the sea in the first place? So
Hmm.
of course you cannot clean plastic of the sea with like natural agriculture, biomimical
Yeah.
systems, because there's no way, or there's an oil spill, or there's the stuff that are incredibly harmful for the environment and that have to be like fixed.
Hmm.
I think we can use the technology for that.
Okay. I like that. That's a good answer. Okay, cool. I just wanted to see your perspective on it. Interesting.
Okay, and well, maybe this for the last answer and to close.
Sure.
Um, I would like to know what advice would you give to young people like myself, or even younger generations,
Mhm.
who are interested in community living, or maybe who are just questioning of the systems. Like, what is something you, as someone who's experienced it and who's been in this world for a few more years than any of us or of people my age or the people that go to my school, what is an advice you could give us?
Good question. Well, I have a 13-year-old daughter, so I'll give the same advice I gave her. And it's changed a little bit in the last year since I've been here, but it not the principles. Well, first of all, if you're interested in different ways of living, or different ways of thinking, or different ways of eating, or any of those things, they're all part of the answer, because being part of community affects a lot of different aspects of life, right? So all the things I just mentioned, like from food to the living to all of that stuff. Well, first of all, it requires you going out to see it for yourself. Don't take anyone else's words or advice at face value. Go see it for yourself. So go look at some of these communities. Go look at how different people live and see, is that something that you want? When you're asking questions to the people that live there, or a person that lives that way or eats that way or whatever it is, right? Um, don't just ask them the easy questions that they're going to love to answer, like, how did this way of living benefit your life? And they're going to give you a whole long list. So like I had a conversation, I don't want to get controversial again, but on the weekend about veganism versus vegetarianism versus being an omnivore versus being a carnivore, right? So there's this extreme spectrum. You have carnivore on one side, you have vegan on the other. They're extreme, and then you have omnivore and vegans that are kind of closer to the middle. Vegetarians, and they're closer to the middle. So having that conversation with this individual, I could tell that no matter what I said or no matter what he said, it wasn't always going to land. Like, we weren't going to hear each other. So my follow up question is, have you tried this? Have you spoken to someone that's of this, way of living? And they say, of course I have. Yeah, yeah. I said, did you ask a lot of questions? Did you ask a few questions? Did you ask easy questions or did you ask hard questions? Because sometimes asking those hard questions will reveal the reality. Because some people want to sell you on an idea or a concept. It's very human. It's very human. It doesn't matter what subject. You brought up feminism earlier, and you could see it there. You can have a room full of feminists, but they can all argue about how to approach it or what it really means. But the way you get through all the noise is to ask the difficult questions. And that usually means, what's your solution that's long term? Usually that question will catch people, because people will tell you, oh, you should totally try this way of living, it's the best, but they don't give you the bad parts, right? So that's number one. So that would be experience. Go experience and ask a lot of questions and ask difficult questions. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, ask the uncomfortable questions. Sometimes I ask myself, what would my dad ask me if he didn't agree with me? He'd ask me these hard questions, like, why do you want to start this business? And he's going to attack me on it. So I always put myself in that position and go, okay, I should do the same to other people, right? And then the final thing is, and it's the one thing that's helped me in life the most, well, two things, is one is you're going to hear a lot of different things in life, a lot of different ways of living, and you're going to have completely different views today. And then 10 years from now, they're going to be completely different. You'll be like, good God, how did I believe that 10 years ago? Or, your opinions are going to change. It happens to me all the time. It still happens. And if it doesn't happen, you're dead. Anyways, the point is, what got me through it all was a little bit of a trust in my own instinct. And what I did was, if I wanted to get super fit, or if I wanted to get super rich, if I wanted to have money, right? Forget about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but let's say you want money. Are you going to ask a homeless guy on how to make a lot of money? Are you going to ask someone that's completely unfit and overweight how to be fit?
No.
So if you're at a community and it's not what you want, they're not going to give you the advice that you want. Look for the types of people you want to be like. Look for the types of ways you want to live like and how you want to grow. And then ask those people that have done those things, how do they do it? Because usually they're on the path that you want to. They've gone through the path where you're about to pick which path to go on. Well, how do you know which path to take? You ask the person that's where you want to be, how they got there, and just start walking. So that's a key piece of advice. If you want to make $1 million, don't ask a homeless guy how to do it. It's as simple as that. Like, I know that's a bad example, meaning because we just finished talking about capitalism and all that. But like, if you want to have abundance of whatever, ask the person that has abundance. Don't ask the person that's lacking. If you're going to talk to the person that's lacking, don't ask them how to get abundance. Ask them what they do to have lack. They'll give you an answer. Like, you'll find out within a few minutes why someone has no friends. You just have a conversation with them for 10, 15 minutes and you're like, oh, okay, that's why you have no friends. Got it. You know what I'm saying? That person doesn't know why. So that would be my advice. If you want to find a community, different ways of living, alternative or this and that on any of the subjects we discussed, look for the people that have what you want. And then you better make sure you ask them a lot of questions, because maybe that's not what you're going to want in 10 years. But I would definitely do that. And then for me, the last piece of advice, and I made a YouTube video about it back in the old days before the influencers was a thing or anybody was YouTubing. I'm telling you, like 12, 13 years ago. And it was a little saying that I came up for myself about 15 or 20 years ago when I started going down the path of like weird information. Let's just call it that. Weird information, alternative information of all sorts. To keep me grounded, because I knew I could get lost in like rabbit holes looking into ancient civilizations or aliens or conspiracy or whatever subject you want to bring, you're going to get lost. Spirituality in particular, that's how I started my path, was on trying to understand consciousness. So I came up with a saying, and it goes like this. It's my little axiom. The right answer to the wrong question remains a wrong answer. So spend more time with the question. So I can repeat that for you. The right answer to the wrong question remains a wrong answer. So spend more time with the question. Basically, ask good questions. You'll get good answers. And there is such thing as dumb questions. I hate that when I hear there's no such thing as a dumb question. Yes, there is. There most certainly is dumb questions.
Yeah, I think so too. It's a great quote. It's a great phrase, and it's great to like remind yourself of that. Thank you so much for sharing.
No problem. Thanks for the interview.
No, thank you so much. And what you say for now is like of this asking questions and everything. I just feel so glad I got to have this interview with you because it's like
No
yay,
problem.
yay! I'm doing sort of that. I'm getting a little bit informed, and although it's for a school project, it's really relevant for me personally. And yeah, thank you for your time. I'm sorry that it took a lot more than what I said it would,
Oh no,
but
no,
you
no, no.
but it was so interesting, and I hope it was great for you too.
Absolutely, no. It was fantastic. I loved it. It was great. And don't worry about the time. I actually was happy that we did it because my other plans got canceled. So this is good. A good conversation is always good.
Okay, so yeah, I think that's all for me. I don't know if you want to add something else, or that's it.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to say thanks, and you did a way better job than I think you did. You great. You should podcast. You should interview people. You're really good at it.
Oh,
And
thank
I
you.
mean that. I mean that. I mean that. It's true.
Thank you so much, and I'll definitely listen to your podcast and go check out more of your content because I didn't really have the time from in the morning, but I will totally
Oh,
follow you and check out your content. So thank you.
no problem. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Okay, yeah. So bye, Mano.
Bye.